one round with all the speakers. And we're going to kick off with Diane, who on top of talking about her own case study and what she's doing in the regenerative tourism field, she's actually giving a brief, very quick introduction on what is regenerative tourism. Then she will talk about her organization and what they're doing and the impact on there. And we're going to go through the case studies. And then we're going to have another round looking at exploring a bit more how we move from individual operators to a more systematic approach to changing the tourism systems. And hopefully we should have then plenty of time for some stimulating discussion. And nice to see some people, quite a few people coming online right now. Just quick hello to Nick after seeing you in Adelaide yesterday, and welcome to everyone else. Lots of new faces, which is great, but also of familiar faces. Welcome you all. So without further ado, over to Diane. Tell us a bit about regenerative tourism and tell us a bit about the Tourism Collab.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Roberto, and welcome everyone. It's my pleasure just to open today's session, and I know that there's lots of great speakers here who are going to give you some really practical examples of regenerative tourism and social enterprise. So I'm going to start off by just explaining the change that we need to have in tourism, the change that is happening, whether we're ready for it or not. So regenerative tourism at its simplest is actually just an approach that really tries to ensure that travel and tourism delivers a net positive benefit to people, places, and nature. And what I mean by that is that we really need to shift from a degenerative approach where we're taking and exploiting communities and natural resources towards a regenerative approach where tourism can actually give back and it can help to encourage a flourishing of local communities and also a replenishment and a regeneration of nature. It's an approach that we've been working on. Really, it's been around for probably 10 years or so, but it really represents a shift beyond sustainability. So sustainability really comes from an industrial tourism industry mindset, where we're really trying to face the industry and build industry's capacity to shift towards, sort of green or sustainable tourism. Regenerative tourism pushes this further and suggests that we really actually need to change our mindsets, and we need a new relationship with nature and with communities. And there's so many things that are going on in tourism. There's been this really big shift that post-pandemic, we're really seeing these shifts that regenerative tourism will speak to. So 4 key sort of shifts or trends. There's a rise in conscious consumerism and conscious consumers who want to make choices about their travel and about their visitor experiences, what they do in destinations based on a deeper sense of purpose and a deeper sense of connection with the community, as well as a concern for the environment. So travellers are becoming more conscious. Communities are also wanting a say in what tourism does to their communities. They want to actually have tourism be in service of the local community and of nature, instead of tourism being done to it. It wants to do or to be engaged in the decision making around what happens in their communities. There's also a huge shift towards business with purpose. And this is what we'll be focusing on more today when we talk about social enterprise. But clearly businesses who develop a really strong sense of purpose, which is connected to the destination or the place, which delivers a social and an environmental benefit, those businesses are actually doing better. They retain their staff, and their staff are more innovative and connected into their business as well. And then the fourth key trend that is really speaking towards the pushing of regenerative tourism is that you know, we've just got this increasing concern and this increasing climate environmental crisis that we really need to address. So in order to do that, it's really very possible for businesses, any kind of businesses that are involved in delivering tourism or building capacity in tourism, to think about how they deliver purpose and a stronger community and environmental benefit. So that's a kind of brief introduction to regenerative tourism, but you'll get to understand a little bit more as we start to unpack what this means and give you some case studies today. So my business and the way that I work in regenerative tourism is through two companies that I have. One is called the Tourism Collab, where we're developing capacity across the world in regenerative tourism by taking people on design journeys in a global cohort, where we're actually really starting to explore and to share the journeys that we're taking together. And that collaborative international learning is incredibly important. We also offer scholarships, and for people in need and for destinations in need, we have been doing some pro bono work there as well. But the main reason, or the main way that I'm really embedded in regenerative tourism and delivering regenerative tourism at the moment is through a regenerative tourism living lab on Flinders Island in Tasmania. That is a small island in the middle of Bass Strait that has got some fairly significant tourism problems, mostly around a really impoverished sense of social license that emerged over the COVID period. It became very over-touristed, and the community is really wanting a say in how to regenerate their community, how to regenerate their local environment, and using tourism to do that. And we're delivering this regenerative tourism living lab over 2 years, working in terms of really trying to deeply engage with the community, a type and a style of community engagement that is very rare. And we've been told again and again that the community is not used to really being engaged and being asked and seeing the data and helping us make sense of you know, what we're finding. So we're really engaged in building that social license. And then another part of what we're doing is we're actually running, with the help of Roberto, a regenerative tourism accelerator program, where we're picking up community-led projects and business projects where the people that are involved in this incubator or this accelerator are actually really trying to deliver social and environmental good using tourism markets. And so that's just really starting to ramp up now. But we've got incredibly, in an island community of around, it's about just over 1,000 people, we've got potentially a good 20 to 30 people who are actually going to take this journey with us, hopefully to really build that ecosystem change and to really start to build the synergies that will help us get that systems change happening. So it is, you can actually, I'll pop later in the chat the link to the website so that you can check that out. But I think that's probably enough from me, Roberto, and I'll hand it back to you.
Fantastic, fantastic, Diane. Thanks for that great kickoff to the session. So I would like now to pass the baton to Andrea Comastri. Andrea, are you happy to go next?
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks, Roberto. And
Pleasure.
Thanks, Diane, for your introduction as well. Very, very important to set the scene. I might just try and share my screen to see if I can accompany my words with some visuals, not major stuff, but just to give you a little bit of a flavor of what I'm talking about. You should be able to see my screen.
Yep.
And I will go into presentation mode. So my name is Andrea Comastri. I am the co-founder and executive director of Hotel Etico Australia. Hotel Etico is the first social enterprise hotel in Australia. We opened in November 2020 in the thick of the COVID crisis. That you would think that is a crazy decision, but it was just the right decision for us at the time for a number of factors that were just made at the right time to take the plunge, and with no regrets, to be honest. Sorry, I just had a bit of an accident or something falling on top of my computer, but we've recovered quickly. The hotel is based on an Italian model that was born approximately 10 years ago in northern Italy, in Asti, Albergo Etico, and it's effectively loosely organized as a social franchise around the world, and it's expanding around the world with 5 hotels in Italy, 1 in Argentina, 1 in Slovakia, and we are the first one in Australia. We employ and train young people with intellectual disability on a 12-month program. There's an on-site Academy of Independence, so it's an apartment where the trainees live when they work at the hotel, and that is because it's a program that not only provides hospitality skills training on the job, but also probably even more importantly, independent living skills. So the trainees transfer the skills that they learn on the job in what is the big home that a hotel represents in a metaphorical way into their private independent setting, which is the first time that they experience, generally speaking, independent living, and then eventually bring it home. But with the most likely outcome that they will eventually live independently and not with their families. They're adults, they're 18 plus, they're there for 12 months, an intensive person-centered program. We are an NDIS provider, a National Disability Insurance Scheme provider, that allows us to support them throughout the program. And we support them to secure open employment beyond the hotel, as well as being employed with us during the 12 months. The first group of 6 trainees is about to graduate in the next couple of months, finishing the program that was slightly extended because of COVID, and a new cohort of 12 trainees, we've doubled the group, has already started in the month of April, and they're overlapping with the current month. Why do we do this? We do this because 1 in 5 people in Australia has a disability. There are approximately 2 million people that can work who have a disability, and they are not employed. If they're employed, they earn less than half than a person without a disability. And quite shockingly, a recent report of only a few years ago puts Australia on the out of 29 OECD countries at the 21st place for labour force participation with people with disability. And we are trying to change that, and we do that in a very practical way. How do we do it? We've set ourselves up as a social enterprise. We're a registered social enterprise and not for profit. We're a boutique hotel in the heart of the Blue Mountains, the UNESCO World Heritage Site, in Mount Victoria, in the Upper Blue Mountains. We've got 16 rooms, all with ensuite, queen and family rooms. We have a beautiful restaurant. We have a beautiful bar, conference facilities, wedding events, and the difference that that we bring to the space is that as a social enterprise that employ people with disability, they are front and center of the experience. They're not tucked away to do some little job behind the scene or to do some repetitive role or something that is unnecessary, but they actually run the place and they own the place. They're the focus of the hotel. We want people first and foremost to come to the hotel because it's a beautiful site, because it's a beautiful holiday destination. and it just happens to produce an amazing social impact on a daily basis, and you become part of that social impact experience. The trainees from day one, they're immersed in hands-on work, whether it be in the kitchen, whether it be making rooms, whether it be doing housekeeping in general, whether they be running the restaurant, whether they be at reception, or whether they be social activities within the hotel itself, or participating in fitness classes with guests that are offered to guests as well. And the journey in which our trainees go in a very intense way over a period of 12 months is quite remarkable. And the transformation is multi-layered. And I'll close with that. The transformation is not just for the trainees. Of course, they live it on their own life, and they transform from day one to day 365 and beyond after we help them find employment in open employment. But the transformation is for the people that work with them, the hospitality professionals that work with them. They have their life transformed, because most of them, for the first time, are working with the people with a person with disability, and they hadn't done that before. And so you see the transformation on a daily basis in them. Transformation is for their families, because for the first time, they have them living away from home and actually witnessing their journey to independence, which is quite remarkable. Then the transformation is for all the guests that come through the door of the hotel, that for the first time experience a work setting, a holiday setting, a normal setting with people with disability in a fully functioning working environment. And it's not about being there for charity or feeling sorry for the people that are working there, but they're actually completely interacting in a normalized way, as bad as that word is, which is absolutely transformative for them. And then obviously the transformation is for everybody else in the community, because we work with the hospitality sector and the tourism sector in the Blue Mountains to start with, but we're starting to go beyond that to actually employ our trainees once they graduate. And help them transform their own inclusive practices of employment. So this is in a nutshell who we are, what we do. We were able to start because we had some philanthropic support to start with, and that's unavoidable for us to start with, being a not-for-profit organization. And we are on a journey to self-sustainability, and it's a tough journey, like any business, I suppose. But obviously, being a social enterprise with all the support, costs, and needs and pressures that we have, the journey is just a little bit tougher, and that's where philanthropy comes into the picture. But we are very keen to achieve the point where commercial revenue is the majority of the revenue, with a little bit of NDIS revenue, and with obviously a little bit of cream on top of philanthropic and fundraising support on an ongoing basis. This is us, and I look forward to the next round and to questions later on.
Amazing, Andrea. Simply amazing. I get the goosebumps just listening to this. I get so, because, tourism has always been my first sector and first love, even before social enterprise. So, but to see, that nexus between tourism and social enterprise, and to see how it can work so well, it's absolutely fantastic. So my next question to you is, when are you opening a Victorian franchise?
As soon as we can. So our vision is definitely to have at least a hotel in every state and territory in Australia. We definitely have interest, both from potential guests to potential funders to potential trainees and staff, undeniably. Obviously, we need to start walking one step at a time before we run. We are getting there, and there's no doubt that Victoria, Canberra, Brisbane, and everywhere else in Australia are targets for us. And so the way to make it happen is to visit the hotel and support it, and obviously make it more viable quicker. And then obviously when we set foot in other states and in other territories, to support it in every possible way.
Wonderful, wonderful, Andrea. Thank you very much for this presentation. That is great. Right, so I would invite Andrea Lane to come up next. Andrea, are you with us?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Hi.
Welcome,
Cool.
Andrea. Over to you.
Cool. Yeah, gee, thanks. That's a hard act to follow already. I guess I'm Andrea Lane with the Float project in East Gippsland, Far East Gippsland, a region that's quite reasonably remote. Does it reasonably tough in terms of tourism. We've always been a little bit in the shadow of other regions of Victoria. And of course, the bushfires had a huge impact on the region as well. So I'm really grateful to Diane's introduction because I suppose what I'm about to show you is a very tiny little bit of case study of our journey as Float. So if I can get this right and share this disabled screen sharing.
Julia, can you enable? It should be enabled.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Yes, I can.
Thanks. I'm just much better if I have some photos to speak to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to. Okay,
And they're wonderful photos.
Well,
You're able to.
I'll just, yep. Okay, you can see that okay?
Wonderful, yes.
Okay, so yeah, we're Float. And Float is a floating art studio. So about 6 years ago, we did get arts funding to build a floating art studio on Lake Tyers. So artists come to the region and live and make art on this floating studio. Sorry, no, that's okay.
Yeah. Can I ask people to mute themselves? Because there's a bit of background noise, please. Can I ask participants to mute themselves?
So I guess I just wanted to illustrate what a long journey it's been to get to this point. I've lived in East Gippsland for 20 years now. I came as an economist, funnily enough, to marry an artist. And after Diane's conference here in Now a few weeks ago, she asked us to write a little one-liner response to the session. And my comment was the artists were right, because that's my overwhelming conclusion, is that the people that I've surrounded myself with are the artists. And in a way, they've been onto this regenerative thing right from the start without necessarily having the words and the jargon to demonstrate it. So I guess I'm hoping that through what we've done, we're proving it. We're probably not as a fully fledged social enterprise yet. We're not operating profitably, but I think you'll see we're kind of well on the way. We started off as Fruit, which was me arriving in East Gippsland as a city slicker who has no real regional skills, one of which was bottling fruit. So one of my first experiences here was to meet the local GP who taught me how to bottle fruit. And out of that experience were conversations. And that's been the key to everything, is through, not in a really top-down way have we created Float. It's totally been about bottom-up conversations and gathering your own fruit from your backyard and bottling it and then sharing it as a fruit breakfast was key to our development. I took a great liking to writing grant applications, and this was the outcome of one of my first ones, which was to build a fruit cart, which was inspired by some other artists who were delivering breakfasts around a Sydney park. Ours was the fruit cart, which a local blacksmith designed and built with some Creative Victoria funding, which allowed us to travel then all across East Gippsland, sharing our fruit breakfasts with people all across the region. And that really shaped our philosophy about generosity and the art of conversation. So this was Gary Belsky who built this beautiful fruit cart. As a result of those fruit breakfasts, we then got invited down to the Writers Victoria Festival to host their breakfast. And that really made us start to realise the skills that country people have are really undervalued until they're seen through the prism of a kind of a marketing package with a bit of flair and some great style, and just really loving what you do in your local community. Out of the fruit breakfast grew a project called Fruitville, which is an annual festival that we run at Nicholson and Lakes Entrance here every year. And it really just celebrates all those skills, all those people that kept informing me about the value of the environment. And that was the great lesson to me, from the people in Goongerah to Mallacoota who love their environment, all showed me what the marketing department was missing for East Gippsland. What they were marketing was a kind of a posh end of town. And what I saw that was so absolutely engaging was the grassroots small towns who love to share their local knowledge. Having Costa Georgiatus come to one of our Fruitvilles was a great breakthrough, because suddenly the councils and the bureaucrats realised this was something that actually was important and marketable. So Costa became a great, I don't know if you know who Costa is, but he's a fairly significant celebrity who loves what we do. So he's become a great advocate for fruit. We then went down to Docklands in Melbourne and established an artist-made travel bureau under the Renew program that they had there. So if you're familiar with Marcus Westbury's program that transformed Newcastle in New South Wales by occupying spaces with artists, that was adopted in Docklands in Melbourne, and we were lucky to be the recipient of that. So for $20 a week, we got to have city rental and played around with this idea of an artist-led travel bureau and actually engaging and telling that story from a kind of a untourism perspective. We did that for about a year, actually, which was quite a dedicated commitment. Here you see the fruit cart in action, and the little shop that's now opened in Bairnsdale, which is an artist collective and social enterprise. They've been going for 7 years now. And I think last year they turned over about $100,000 worth of arts products because of a particularly dedicated crew, I have to say. But, you know, I suppose that's all part of the story that we're talking about. And it gave an outlet for artists that was just not possible before all of this started to happen. At about this time, we were encouraged to join the Social Traders Crunch program, which really took us off in the direction of social enterprise, thanks to some local people. And our Social Traders business plan was around developing a glamping experience in East Gippsland, particularly around Point Hicks, which is very far east. It was an amazing program to be part of, and we were one of the few regional organisations to participate and to graduate from the Crunch program. The glamping business never got off the ground, but as you probably know, every step's a bit of a part of the journey. What we then proposed was a design competition to design the best camping glamping structure by putting up a $5,000 prize. And we got entries from around the world of these glamping structures that kind of put the idea on the map that we were able to. This was a design by Giant Grass, who are a Melbourne team of bamboo architects, which proposed this. And we then crowdfunded through Possible the building of the prototype. So that went really viral on social media, thanks to Giant Grass. They were actually able to really push the idea of what they could do with bamboo architecture and in regional places. So that was another step along the journey. Then we built the float. All through this, of course, we're building the float studio. This was the launch of it here on Lake Tyers. And it's a very beautiful thing. The grant that we got to build this was $350,000. We ran out of money 2/3 along the way, I suppose, and the rest of it was finished by volunteers. So as you can imagine, that brings a lot of community ownership to the project. And I think in the long term that pays, not that you want to run out of money, of course, but that buy-in by the community really helps you have a lot of love for what you're doing. I guess this is kind of just in here because I write a fair bit for Gippslandia, which is a local publication, which is also a social enterprise, and they are so supportive of what we do. Having this targeted publishing of our story to a really receptive audience that changes the perception of what Gippsland is really helps. So the byline there was how nature seduced us at Float. So, you know, it's a really good opportunity for me to explain the story in a more coherent way, because I have to actually think about what I'm writing. Float has gone on to host artists in residence all through the pandemic. It's been a bit of a struggle to offer that in a really ongoing, regular way, just dodging lockdowns and things like that. But the breakthrough we had last year was when the National Gallery of Victoria said they wanted to partner with us to showcase what we've been doing. This was one of those projects. It was called the Kayak Orchestra, and it really was bringing beautiful artists to do what they do on the lake and have 30 kayakers come and make music on the lake with the National Gallery of Victoria, which adds a lot of credibility to what you're trying to do. This was an example. So this is from the deck of Float looking out at that kayak orchestra. I guess I may not have addressed any of the questions you might have about what we are, but I suppose Float is the core of a much bigger ecosystem of ideas. And that's what's important to us. That gives lots of people the opportunity to buy into the project. This is Sam Maluk, who's one of our best seafood chefs. Husband is a fisherman, sells and cooks fish from the trawlers. So we were able to collaborate with her in that slipway shed. And I have to say, we've probably saved it from a developer by being a community that really wants to preserve its most authentic history around the fishing industry. So we're still waiting for that lease to be signed, but as you know, bureaucracy can move quite slowly, but this is where we've had a few pop-ups and we're waiting to sign the lease on this, which is a beautiful building. And at the same time, while we waited for the slipway, my husband refitted the historic iceworks as a gallery because we couldn't keep waiting for the bureaucracy to take quite so long. So we run this, and I quite proudly say this is actually our superannuation in action, because I think that's a great untapped resource that we're all missing, that we'd much rather our money be in a structure that can grow an arts community and a destination. And we have markets and we have workshops and all sorts of things, because people are so appreciative of it. They want to help, they want it to survive. So that's the iceworks that we have now. And I guess this is just the infographic that you don't have to take in detail at the moment, but is really helpful to us. We have an artist illustrator who tells our story so beautifully with illustrations that we've been able to take out full page ads in Gippslandia that say to people, have a look at this, you'll see how the whole thing fits together, but come and ask us questions if you want to know what it all actually means. So that's probably enough from me for now. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. This is just simply amazing. We love your work. We love your ability to use the arts to weave those threads through community engagement and businesses and different sectors. You know, I've seen that potential elsewhere. The power of the arts as a regenerative force in destinations, in communities or whatever, is still something that is definitely there. It's definitely happening, but it's not tapped in enough. So thank you for leading the way, certainly here in Victoria, and I would almost say in Australia on that front. And fantastic work. Thank you, Andrea. Right, Cameron, can I pass over to you?
Yep, thanks, Roberto. So my case study today is in regards to a project that I'm working with through my consulting business called Regen Tourism, and it's very Aussie. Aussies love to shorten things, so hence Regen Tourism. So, but before I go into the case study itself, I'll just give a bit of a background on me and my journey to get where I am with this project. So I've done a lot of a long history in the tourism sector. Done a lot of remote work. I've worked in the islands off Queensland. That's where I cut my teeth in the sector. Spent some time in Northern Territory. I operated my first or managed my first hotel in a property west of the McDonnell Ranges. Moved up to Darwin, ended up at Cape York for a period of time when there was a resort sitting at the very northern tip of Australia, working with the Indigenous community up there. I worked over in Norfolk Island for a period of time. And then moved back and bought and operated some businesses myself. So I've had restaurants, I had a hotel in the beautiful Byron Bay region of Australia, which you're probably familiar with. And then I actually established a glamping business. And Andrea, I didn't know about the glamping business that you just talked about, or the glamping designs, but I actually had Australia's largest glamping business at one stage called Flash Camp, and we operated glamping at all the major festivals, events on the East Coast, at music festivals, and then we licensed it and set it up in Kakadu and the Territory. We had some outlets at Mount Isa in North Queensland and in Victoria as well. So I've had a really long history in the industry, in my own businesses, and working with Indigenous communities, and then breaking into some innovative spaces. So that sort of led me into some tourism organisations. So I currently chair the regional tourism body for the North Coast of New South Wales, which takes in just north of Sydney, right up to the border in Queensland. So for those that don't know, the North Coast experienced major flooding recently through Lismore. We were really inundated through that period, and we're a very high tourism destination. We're probably one of the most established in regional Australia, and we're actually the third highest visited region outside of Sydney and Melbourne as a combined region on the North Coast, something that some people aren't that familiar with, but we've got key destinations such as Port Macquarie, Coffs Harbour, Byron Bay, and up into the Tweed. So really mature destination. So in my role as chair of that organisation, I've also been privileged to work with some Indigenous people across the North Coast, and got introduced to an Indigenous leader by the name of Clark Webb. Clark started off in the tourism industry running a stand-up paddleboard tour out of Coffs Harbour, and very forward thinking, looking at what the tourism industry could generate from a revenue perspective and obviously a profitability perspective, and tapping in to see what the Indigenous community of that area can actually, number one, what they can contribute, and number two, what benefits they could gain from the industry to put back into their community. So starting off from a paddleboard tour, they branched into a cafe on one of the most highly visited destinations in Sealy Lookout in Coffs Harbour. And then, not resting on that, they looked further afield to see what they could further create. They looked at the overall economic value of tourism for that destination, and they gathered if they could just get at least 5% of that economic value from tourism for the Indigenous community, that could go a long way to create a self-sustaining community and autonomy to fund their own social enterprises from that. So that I got involved at that point when they were looking at new products. We applied for a grant fund through state government to build an eco resort on Sealy Lookout. Well, actually, originally it was further in Coffs Harbour itself, in the township. And we were successful in getting $5.5 million from state government to invest in this tourism product. So the stage that we're at now, we actually had to move locations and purchase a block of land at Sealy Lookout. The block of land is spectacular. It looks north over the split solitary islands, and it's on an old banana plantation and avocado farm. And we're building a 20-cabin eco resort, fully off-grid, in this beautiful destination. I believe it's the first eco resort that will be owned, developed, and fully managed and operated by an Indigenous community. The beauty of it is that every bit of profit that will be derived from this operation will go towards the community. And the key aspect or the key organisation it will go to is a brand new bilingual school that just opened in Coffs Harbour, the first in New South Wales. So it's opened 2 months ago. It's called the Gingani Freedom School. from the Gumbaynggirr people in that region. They're starting off with years 1 to 3, and then their ambitions are to grow that school to do years 1 right through to grade 12, housing up to 800 to 1,000 students from the community from that region. The reason that they've gone towards the tourism aspect and building that to get profits to drive into that school is specifically around wanting to, they have their own purpose, they have their own way that they want to educate, and the more autonomous they are, the more self-funded they are, the more control they can put towards educating their community in the means that they want to educate them. And it's such a beautiful and powerful story, because they will stick within the criteria of what they have to from a government perspective, but they have so much more autonomy to do if they have their own funding to put towards that. So the stage that we're at with that, that development, we've done all the master planning. We're pretty close to submitting a DA, and the process will be, we actually have to build and finalise and open the resort within 12 months. So we've got until June 30, 2023 to launch and deliver on the product. But we're pretty confident that we can deliver on this, and the numbers that we've projected for this, it is fully in line with what's needed in this region. It's a nature-based, off-grid eco resort. Coffs Harbour itself is one of the first, or one of the few destinations itself that are now fully accredited as an Ecotourism Australia accredited destination, which again is fantastic. So it aligns itself with everything that's happening in that region. So yeah, on that note, that's my case study, Roberto. So yeah, thank you. Yep, still on mute, Roberto, sorry.
I do this all the time. I'm famous for it. So fantastic, Cameron. Wonderful work. Amazing, inspiring, absolutely inspiring, like all the stories that we've heard so far. And speaking of which, last but not least, it's my pleasure to introduce to my good friend, Andrew Keast. Andrew,
thanks, Roberto. Thank you. Fantastic to be here. And yeah, totally inspiring. I didn't know so much of what Cameron shared and everyone else. So it's really fantastic to be here. I'm Andrew Keast, co-founder of Wayfairer. For those of you who don't know, Wayfairer is a cooperative and regenerative tourism booking platform. But I guess as a way of background to myself, I've spent the last 10 years working in the social enterprise space. With another hat, I work with in the refugee employment sector, and many years before that in recruitment and human resources. So you might ask, well, how did that lead me to tourism? Well, it was really through the social enterprise dimension, I suppose, that I discovered this global movement called platform cooperativism, which is really about how technology can be seen of in a different light than the current extractive models of Airbnb and Uber and other platforms that are largely designed to extract capital of all sorts out of destinations back to, in many instances, Silicon Valley. So it was a conference I attended about 5 years ago on platform cooperativism. A champion from New York, Nathan Schneider, presented on what would happen if we could imagine that the likes of platforms like Airbnb and Uber, what if they were cooperative and place-based and community-owned? What would happen as a result of that? That I was completely inspired, and the thought of applying the cooperative model to tourism and technology had really compelling future for me. So hence Wayfairer was born. So I'll just share a couple of slides about the Wayfairer model. So Wayfairer is really designed around one key premise, and that is this idea that not idea, it's a fact that over $150 million flows offshore from Australia, just from Australia alone, every year through international booking platforms. And most of those international booking platforms are paying little or no tax in Australia. So it was, how could we actually reverse that trend and start to look at not just financial capital, but all sorts of forms of capital, how that can be redirected and flow back in to support communities. And so the Wayfairer platform is really a booking marketplace where revenue is shared with local community and with the tourism sector. So like Cameron talked about in terms of the Indigenous project that he's working on, that if we looked at just 10% of that $150 million flowing offshore and redirected that back into community, what sort of impact could we have on those communities that are potentially most in need of that? So for us, it's really about disrupting the market share of the majors. And in Australia, and it's common in other countries, the major players in the market are Airbnb and VRBO. So in Australia, in excess of 80% market share. But what we're really seeing is a real change in the dynamic and a lot more appetite for smaller providers and platforms like Ripper Ride and Unyoked and Tiny Away coming into the market, and people looking for different types of experiences. So we're really looking at disrupting the majors in that regard and see ourselves in that sort of middle segment there. And so for communities, and Diane touched on this, in contrast to current models like Airbnb that we see eroding regional wealth and social license, Wayfairer can support investment in community and tourism infrastructure. So again, if you're talking about that financial reinvestment. So how we actually do that is through two main avenues. Firstly, we're a community-owned accommodation booking platform, and guests pay the same as they would on other platforms. But the key difference is that we split the revenue in the ways defined there. So 50% of our revenue covers the operating costs of the cooperative, and the members of the cooperative are the community themselves, the hosts and the community. And then 50% of the revenue goes back into the community, into projects as defined by the community, but with sort of premise of them being social and environmentally focused. And so we think this creates a sort of compelling shared value. So everyone's pulling in the same direction. Wayfairer is owned and governed by the local community and the key stakeholders. Guests get to choose through booking with Wayfairer where that 50% of the guest booking fee goes. So it's engaging the guests in community and what's important to community. So the community might nominate projects around koala conservation, social projects around housing or other particular projects. And then the guest, on visiting the region, gets a sense of what's important with the community and then makes a call on what they would like to invest in and then have a deeper connection with that community. And in that way, everyone benefits from the community investment, whether it be economic benefit, social, cultural, or environmental outcomes. And so just like with Airbnb, it's a very easy to use platform where guest searches in the region, they book their stay in the region. But the third dimension is the really important one, where they get to select a project that they may have experienced, as I said, in region for their funds to go to. And the real path to market for us is through local stakeholders and collaboration. So collaboration with local media outlets, and we're just running a pilot in Gippsland at the moment. So very close with Andrea's work, partnering with Gippslandia, which is again another social enterprise in Gippsland, to share content. Partnering with the local tourism boards and aligned groups like the Gippsland Social Enterprise Collective, local council, state government, community groups and event organisers. So we've got this fantastic collaboration happening with events like the East Gippsland Winter Festival and the Gippsland Country Music Festival, and sharing content about what they're doing, which is really about that community wealth building and sharing of the valuable assets that those communities have. Just to give you a snapshot of the sort of impact that we see Wayfairer having, obviously over time, I've just taken a snapshot of live data right now of how many properties are listed on either Airbnb or VRBO just in Greater Melbourne. There's over 15,000 rental properties and at 54% occupancy and $246 per night. That equates to around $72 million in booking fees that are flowing to Airbnb and VRBO every year. So if you just looked at it, for every 10% market share that we could get, we'd be redirecting over $3.5 million back into those communities. So you can immediately see the sort of impact that Wayfairer could have as we scale. Key benefits really enhancing the destination visitors experience, as I said, through that connection with community, attracting accommodation providers that are aligned to our purpose, engaging the local community in the whole regenerative tourism message. So it's not just the accommodation providers, but the local food hub, the sustainable food restaurants, the kayaking tours, as Andrea mentioned. Everyone's a part of and contributing towards that regenerative tourism. Complementing existing local government budgets and creating local employment opportunities. So key to the Wayfairer model is actually recruiting people in region so that they can then work to onboard hosts and work with events in the region to catalyse those opportunities for redirection of funds. So that's a little snapshot of Wayfairer as we've designed. And as I mentioned, we've got this fantastic pilot running with Gippsland at the moment and about to go live with the platform with around 25 odd properties in the next couple of days. So we're really super excited to be doing that in great partnerships with Destination Gippsland. And yeah, really excited for the future of Wayfairer in Australia and beyond. Back to you, Roberto.
Thank you, Andrew. And you see, I muted me 30 seconds in advance. How good is that? So no, again, another fantastic project. This one in particular, not without detracting to any other project, but this, I left you last because it's a good segue to the next part of the conversation, because I think that what you're trying to do is really that kind of going in and looking at systems and bring some disruption in the system as a whole, because of the booking section and the intermediary sector is so pivotal to his industry, to be able to develop a model that breaks that cycle of extractiveness. Every time you book an hotel in Australia via booking.com, even before the tourist lands in the hotel, let's say it's $100 a night, $30, $25 have gone. Even before the tourist set places there, and they have not gone somewhere in Australia, they've gone, as you said, back in the States. So, this is a very difficult project because you're trying to unseat some very, very big players, but it has huge, huge disruptive potential, which leads me to the second round of questions, to the more difficult round of questions for my panelists. With Catalyst 2030, it's all about system change and particularly enabling collaboration for system change, changing the systems that are broken, changing the systems that are not working, are extractive. So far, we've heard individual case studies, and as beautiful as they are, they're individual case studies, the individual destination, the small, challenging booking system and whatever, etc. The Hotel Ethical, one in Australia, out of, I don't know, 30,000 hotels or whatever. So how do we move from a situation where we have single players working in this tourism sector, in the social enterprise nexus, so that we can work together to actually bring some steps forward to changing the system as a whole? I'm sure that there is no easy answer to that. We're all taking baby steps on that front, but I'd love to hear some of your ideas and some of your thoughts about that. And how, for example, can this group collaborate better? And I've got some ideas towards the end, but I'll be interested to hear from you. So I'm opening this to all the panelists, whoever wants to go first. There you go, Andrew. Last on the first one and first at this one. Off you go.
Thanks, Roberto. I came up with three points that I think may assist in some ways. You said it is really baby steps, but the 3 points that I came up with were to recognise and begin to deeply value the intrinsic wealth and capital that resides within communities right now. And when I think about capital, it's social capital, environmental, cultural, human, and financial capital. So just starting to think about and environmental, I mean natural capital, natural assets that reside within the community, and what our own sort of personal relationships with those. So Andrea talks about Lake Tyers, which is an absolutely stunning lake, and she spoke about the community that's developed around the projects that she's doing. So just I think recognizing and beginning to value those is a really key step, and this idea that if I value it, others will or might. And on a practical level, that means sort of appreciating for and connecting with where I am and what I spend my time and my energy on. That was kind of my first point. And the second point was fostering collaboration, inclusion, and sharing. And I think this goes to Andre and Etico and the amazing work he's doing. But there's alternative forms of exchange and reciprocity and taking this sort of place-based approach. So understanding that what one person values is very different from another, but that we can find there is common ground to be found. And if we can work to find that common ground, then we can sort of foster that collaboration. And the third point that I came up with was just to consider alternative views and learn from nature. We used to think that nature was predominantly or solely about competition, but I think we're kind of realizing, and the scientists are showing us, that nature is highly collaborative and highly cooperative, and that nature has the extraordinary capacity, as Diane said, to regenerate itself if we just give it space to do that. So how do we create the environment for nature to flourish and regenerate? So they were the 3 points I came up with.
Music to my ears, Andrew, music to my ears. And we've got Andrea with his hand up. So over to you, Andrea.
Thanks, Roberto. I've got lots. I mean, I think there's lots of ways. Obviously, there's a lot of answers. That there's not one answer. The way we contribute to that, because I think we are contributing to that vision, is obviously by the value that we add. Is a social value of inclusion of people that otherwise would be outside of work or in non-meaningful work. The way to do it, the way to sort of make it system, and by the way, first of all, just give us some time and there will be more than one, Roberto. There will be multiple. They're not easy feats to get up and running. But obviously, I think there's a lot of bits and pieces that I want to mention. I think the social franchise model is a model that can be an answer or one of the answers. So obviously, you know, like benefiting and making scale out of existing models that already exist, and sort of, you know, like not needing to reinvent the wheel and so on. That's one aspect. We ourselves stand on the shoulders of giants, of those that in Italy started the model, and so we didn't have to reinvent some of the things that we're using. Obviously, social procurement and the growth of social procurement is part of the answer as well, because especially where tourism can be business tourism, because that's still part of the ecosystem of tourism, where spend is directed towards more responsible tourism locations, that helps in doing that. So it's about trying to educate and convince and build the capacity of larger businesses to spend money where you add additional value. So that's another area. And also the other thing that we try to do, as I said before, is build the capacity of normal hotels to be inclusive in their practices, and therefore not needing a specialist hotel that sort of has that strong focus. Because if everyone had their employment practices more inclusive and employed people with challenges to employment and disabilities, then everyone will be adding that additional value through tourism. So they're just some of the things that I suppose can be. And as you said, like, I mean, even doing what we're doing helps the conversation, right? Because I've learned of people that I wasn't aware of before, and there's no doubt that there will be possible collaborations in there. So I'm sure there's other answers as well, but I just thought this is what I could contribute with to start.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you. And I see Cameron's got his hands up next.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I want to bring up. I love what Andrew's doing. I actually, Andrew introduced me to this Catalyst 2030 and this meeting, and I've had my own hotel, and I know how much money and how much the third-party websites drive our businesses. And we are really susceptible, or tourism's always been susceptible to outside influence. We're really slow to engage with technology. And by the time we get around to engaging with new technology, someone's come along and filled that gap and taken that off us. So we're left hanging and being subservient to those new technologies or those bigger companies that have jumped in and filled that gap. So we've got a huge opportunity right now with at the back end of COVID. For once, I think everyone realizes the importance of visitation. Because as soon as people couldn't travel, how much did globally businesses suffer? It wasn't just the tourism destinations, it was right across the world, in capital cities, in regional cities, every location. So there's a real leapfrog for us to jump onto and express and confirm how important the tourism industry is to everybody. So and one of the trends that has created and opened up is the direct booking side of things. So the numbers that I've seen happen is, I think in Europe is really leading it, where the direct booking percentage of your market is increased by up to 25-30%, where it was lagging at about 1-2%. So people want to come direct. They want to actually contribute to you and your community. So taking that message further afield to governments and lobbying really hard with governments to get them to pay attention to the importance of supporting the industry directly and not these third parties or not these companies that have filled the gaps. I think that's one of the key issues that we should be projecting. And the other gap that we've got, or the other major issue we've got, is the staffing issue. It's an issue that we're not going to resolve like we did previously. So we have to look at new ideas and new ways of fulfilling that stuff or that labor shortage. And again, that's a global issue. So that, again, to me, is a huge opportunity to change the way we think and the way we operated, and looking at technology to fill in that gap. So my contribution.
Yeah, thanks, Cameron, for that. The staffing issue has always been a long-term problem, well before COVID or whatever. And, I think the tourism hospitality industry have to take a fair share responsibility to say that we have provided, by and large, excuse the expression, fairly crappy jobs with even crappier pay. And we have not done a good job compared to other industries to look after and nurture our staff talent. So that's a big problem, which I think a lot of social enterprises are addressing. Certainly a lot of the social enterprises in hospitality and tourism that I know of are doing that in a decent way. So I'm conscious of time. So Diane, over to you.
Thanks, Roberto. Just really quickly, and I think I'd just like to respond to Cameron's point about advocacy and lobbying government. It is something that, oh gosh, it's really quite hard because you don't know what you can't see, right? And so there's a real challenge around, getting people, policymakers to understand this. There's a couple of, I think, wormholes or cracks that we need to prise open. One is, an increasing discussion around positive impact. So some states are adopting this notion of positive impact. It's not quite regenerative tourism. It's kind of a half a step there, but certainly trying to exploit that crack and open it up and educate people is really important. And the second sort of policy angle that I think is starting to emerge is around well-being. And I note just last week that the Tasmanian government released Tasmania's first well-being. Well, they're taking a step towards developing their first well-being framework. And the language that they're using, they're going to be leading with hearts and minds to secure the future of Tasmanians. And it talks about a well-being framework that has the right targets to secure community welfare and community benefit in all that it does. And then the third thing it says is that policy shouldn't just be about economic benefit, but it should be about social, community, psychological and health benefits. And so that to me is another crack that we just need to open up and really pursue there. So two important developments, I think.
Thanks, Diane. Thanks, Diane. Yes, absolutely. Very important. Andrew, you had your hand up, but then down. Only if it's brief, because I'm conscious of time, 8 minutes past 6, and I would like to open the debate to participants and also talk a little bit about our tourism groups and our work with Catalyst 2030 in tourism. So, Andrew,
yeah. Two minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes. Just pick up on Cameron's point around staffing. So, you know, and loved Andrea's comment about, you know, obviously employing more people with disability. But one of the really interesting dynamics here, putting my employment hat on, is there's 80 million forcibly displaced people in the world as a result of social and economic or economic and political persecution. But I think the next wave of displacement is going to come through climate change. So there's a real strong connection between tourism and what we do in a social context in terms of employment. I think there's a way that we can potentially bring those together in finding place for people who are displaced and realise, you know, our tourism aspirations. So I just wanted to add that into the mix.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic, and an incredible opportunity, an incredible area for work and whatever. So I'm hoping, you know, first of all, thank you immensely to all the speakers for participating in this. Great contribution, great case studies. For those in the audience that are new to tourism or had a bit of a curiosity about tourism or whatever, I hope that these case studies make it abundantly clear that, you know, the marriage between tourism and social enterprise is one of those marriages made in heaven. The synergies are extraordinary, but that marriage is still not well understood. It is much better than it used to be, believe me, 10 years ago when I first moved, let's say, not so much out from tourism, but into social enterprise 10, 15 years ago. We had a situation where people in tourism said, what is social enterprise? And people in non-social enterprise saying, why we would get involved in hospitality and tourism? It doesn't make sense. It's not health. It's not whatever. I think that connection is much better understood. And I would like to open it up to the audience to see if there's any questions, any burning issues or any contributions. If there are any lurking tourism and social entrepreneurs or hospitality social entrepreneurs in the audience, we would like to hear from you. Andrea, you've got your hands up while we wait for the audience to warm
yeah,
up.
I thought maybe I'd just make a final point just while others were thinking, but perhaps one thing that I didn't explain very well in that final image was our idea about a school of untourism. And I think that's really what Diane particularly responded to, was the idea that we're flipping things to say, let's change the things we value and value local knowledge and local skills, and actually find a marketplace where those things can have a value. So when people come to the regions, in our case, they don't mind paying for it. There's a marketplace for those things. And it was a bit of a loose artistic kind of idea, I guess, when we proposed it. We loved that the NGV embraced it, and that's really why they came here, which added a lot of momentum to the idea. But also when Matt Follert came down from ACRE and talked about the model that he talked at length about, the model they were looking at, which was the folk school. And I'm not able to explain it in a lot of detail, but there are a lot of parallels with that idea, that actually celebrating the traditional skills or the new skills or the nature-based skills, and actually finding a marketplace for those things. Because out here, you don't always need a big job or a full-time job, but you do need to cobble together livelihoods, meaningful livelihoods, which was what we came up with in our manifesto at the Centric and ACRE conference a little while ago, that the purpose of social enterprise was very much about meaningful lives. And I put a lot of importance on that.
Fantastic, fantastic. So feel free to put any questions in the chat or raise your hands. And I'm talking to the audience at the moment. But whilst we do that, what I wanted to put my little call to action. So with Catalyst 2030, those of you that know the organization, a lot of the work that we do is through working groups, and we have an established and quite active Australasia working group on tourism. So this is an open invitation from any of you, even if you're not in Australasia, if you want to pop in and see what's happening. You can do so by, first of all, joining Catalyst 2030, which is free, and secondly, nominating Australasia as your region, and then thirdly, getting either in touch with myself or with Diane, and we're about to put our email addresses in the chat to get involved with the group. I'm a strong believer on the potential of collaboration. I've seen over the chat, just looking at the chat, already links being made, potential, developments and collaborations. And I think that whilst we're all busy doing our own stuff and running our own tourism enterprises or hospitality enterprises, or in my case, consultancy enterprises, I think there's still a lot of scope for collaboration and working together. That does not come at the detriment of our individual businesses. This is an augmentation. So, we can be much, much stronger through collaboration. I still think that there's a long, long way to go before social entrepreneurship and tourism are well established in Australia. There's a lot of work to do. I think there's a lot of work to do with existing tourism and hospitality associations to see what the links are, and also to, I honestly believe, lead the way in the way we reshape the tourism industry and hospitality industry in Australia. We can't allow ourselves to restart from the pre-COVID disruptive model basis. And that's what's most likely going to happen. So, we need to have a stronger voice to show that tourism can be done in a different way, that tourism can be very beneficial to local host communities. And most importantly, it has to be led by host communities. At the moment, the tourism is led by the generating countries, and it's imposed on the host communities. And we need to somehow reverse that. It's a huge step. It's not easy. The whole system is around, generating country. So the countries where tourism comes from, and where the big tour operators and the big airlines are basically dictating what the name of the game is. And we need to change that. Let me see in the chat if we've got some questions coming up. I should also say one last addition. I hope that Nick is here, still with us. So we are starting a collaboration, or we have already started a collaboration with Azina, which is the peak body representing social enterprises in Australia. They're very interested in developing this tourism network and this tourism capability. So we have a series of, we already have our first, correct me if I'm wrong, first or second, we've got a second seminar coming up soon in collaboration with Azina. But we look forward to working with them more closely to see what we can do together in terms of developing the social enterprise parts of tourism. And Nick, if you're online and there and you want to join in and say a few words, that'd be very welcome. But I'm not sure if you're there or not. I can see you, but you're on mute. But while we wait for Nick, we've got Devan Sharma, who's raised her hand. So over to you.
Hello everyone. So I'm Devansh from India, and I'm actually on. I'm planning. It's my research work going on, and I'm planning to open a cave cafe in the Himalayan region in Ladakh. And I completely don't know that it falls in the criteria of regenerative tourism. And secondly, the thing is, my USP is the cave. There are a lot of abandoned caves available in Ladakh region, and I don't know that that is it's sustainable, because I'm adding 3-4 more points. That firstly, it's indigenous. I'm including the tribal people from Ladakh to engage with the general public and the tourists which are coming every year, and the numbers are increasing day by day. So can you help me with that? And what are your thoughts?
Anyone would like to give it a first round, give it a first try? I think, Ranesh, I'll give you the first pass. It's a big question. It's very difficult to answer in one session. I would say, you know, strongly encourage you to maybe join this group and have some longer conversations over it. You know, we would probably need to know a bit more of the background of what you're trying to do and the context and all the possibilities. But certainly, you know, get in touch with us. We put our emails address here in the chat, and we can continue the conversation. But that's not to take away from other speakers that might have some suggestions.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in here. I think you know, as we said, we're really on this journey and don't necessarily have all the answers. But I think in many instances, the answers come from the local community in which you're operating. And so I'd really encourage you as much to talk to the people within the community that you're looking to operate in as to what regenerative means to them and to you, because our interpretation could be very different to your local community. So I think there's a lot of people that actually kind of know what regenerative tourism is, but they might just not use those particular words. But if you spoke about how we can give back to the community, how we can support people that are disadvantaged or marginalised, how can we support children, people with a disability, so that, yeah, that there'd be other ways that people are defining how you can give back and how that reciprocity might work within the context of tourism within your destination. So I'd encourage you just to talk about your vision and your passion with the people that are close to you and around you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Wise advice. But again, also on top of that, which is absolutely crucial, get involved. I mean, there are several groups that are talking about regenerative tourism, Catalyst being one of them. So there's a lot of shared learning to be had. So, you know, you're more than welcome. We're also looking at, there was a global tourism group that has been put on froze, but we are looking at resurrecting that so that hopefully we will have both a global tourism group within Catalyst 2030 and the Australasian one. So keep an eye out for that one too. Right. Are there any other, the audience is very shy. So we might have another 5 minutes. Would any of the speakers would like to add something or some comments? Or maybe we, no? Okay, so Devansh said, let's talk and exchange thoughts. There we go, fantastic. Right.
Roberto, I did notice,
yes.
Roberto, someone earlier, is it Tomo, who's posted something about the work that they're doing in Bali. I've just clicked on Mana Ubud, which just looks like a absolutely amazing eco villa. I wondered if
oh,
sort of
yes,
Tomo
sorry, I missed
spot.
that one. Tomo, are you still here with us? And would you like to talk about it briefly? We would love to hear from you.
Maybe already gone.
Maybe he's gone. Maybe he's one that sort of had an hour. Right. Okay, yeah, I can see it here. Brilliant. Okay, so at this stage, what I propose is to bring the meeting to a close. I know that for some of you, this was going to be a 1 hour, and we sprang the 1.5 hour surprise on you. So first of all, on behalf of Catalyst 2030, I want to thank all of our speakers for contributing to this session. Judging by the comments in the chat, it's been a quite interesting session. There's been a lot of benefits to the participants. A lot of the speakers are member of our Catalyst Tourism group. I hope that the other ones will consider joining and continuing this conversation. With Azina, as we said, we will have further workshops of this kind, focusing specifically on tourism and social enterprise in Australasia. So we look forward to having those conversations. And that's about it from me. Is Jason here? I just want to see if Jason Jacob is here. No. because otherwise I would ask Jason to do his excellent closing of session, but I don't think he's with us. He might have left us a bit before. Right, fantastic. So Ross, yes, fantastic. Ross, do you want to say a couple of words about that?
Yeah, no worries. So as Roberto mentioned, Catalyst 2030 through the subgroups that we've got, and the regenerative tourism one in particular here in Australasia. We've got just a general survey, take you kind of maybe 3 or 4 minutes to fill out, just trying to understand in a little bit more detail kind of who our regenerative tourism stakeholders are, the type of work you do. It is, and it was initially created with a focus on Australia and New Zealand, and I understand and really value the fact that in this group here we have a number of people that are from much further and wider than that. But nevertheless, if you do have 3 to 4 minutes, we would really appreciate you filling in that survey, just telling us a little bit about who you are, the sort of work you do, and more interestingly, the type of ways that if you were to be involved in any of these sorts of things in a more substantial way, how you would like that to be there. We're using this as a kind of rolling survey collection to help us inform the sort of work that we do in the tourism group, and also the ways that we communicate with you. So yes, if you have a few minutes, the link is there in the chat, and we definitely appreciate your time. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ross. Thanks again. One last thing, one invitation before I say goodbye to all of you. Catalyzing Change Week is in full swing. We have 200+ sessions on every single topic under the sun that has to do with social enterprise and collaboration and achieving the SDGs. So I encourage you to go to Catalyzing Change Week 2022 to have a look at the REACH program. Just as in this session, all the sessions are free. Yes, I mean, my trouble is fitting them all in because there's so many interesting things to look at. So once again, thank you for participating in this session. Thank you for your interest in Catalyst 2030. And thank you to the speakers. Wonderful work. I take my hat off to the work that you're all doing. It's just amazing. Cheers, everyone. Bye. Okay, Andrew, I'll catch up soon with you.
See you, Roberto.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.